Welcome back to the shop, guys. As you can see, there's an empty stall in the garage, and I've decided to fill it with a Corvette, something other than a C5. Like most of us, I like all generations of Corvettes, but of course there are some generations I like more than others. But make no mistake, the C5 is at the top of that list, and so it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I simply decided that it is time to expand my overall Corvette experience by adding another generation Corvette to the shop, because there's so much more Corvette engineering that I want to research. There's additional mods I want to do to another generation. Of course, I want the experience of driving and owning another generation Corvette. And most importantly, I hope to reach more Corvette people so that I can have those conversations both in the comments below as well as occasionally in person. For the past year or so, I've been thinking a lot about which generation to pull the trigger on. And the first decision was to decide which generations were in the running based upon the cost of the car. Because for instance, let's look at the C6 Z06. There's no sense really looking too far into it if it's something that you can't or won't be able to make the payments on. So that cat's out of the bag. You won't be seeing a C8 Z06 in this stall. The next step really was to think about and decide what are my plans for the car that ends up in this spot. And that was the hardest part for me because I have all sorts of ideas for modifications for several generations that I think would be fun and interesting to do, and I think you might as well. One of my thoughts was to purchase a C4 Corvette, strip it down and strengthen its chassis, install an LS motor, of course with forced induction, somewhere around 800 or 900 horsepower, and have the first car of my life that's capable of high 9s or low 10s. But after thinking about that quite a bit, the amount of time that I could actually spend on the street with that is pretty minimal. So I've decided to put that up on the shelf for a little while. Maybe that's a retirement project. The next general thought process that I had is that I clearly still am addicted to making a lot of horsepower, so that won't change. I also enjoy learning about the various generations of fuel injection systems that are used on the Corvettes versus something like a Holley Terminator X, which is a standalone fuel injection system that you might want to install on like a big block in a C3. Additionally, I very much appreciate and enjoy how well the Corvettes handle, especially starting with the C4 Corvette, and that was kicked into high gear with the C5. And of course, the newest generations handle even better. So those requirements for me are going to eliminate the C1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, to be fair, you can tune a C4 Corvette, but the software that's available for it is kind of weak and it lacks support. And additionally, the tuning community is very small, so there's not a whole lot of information exchange out there. So for that reason, the C4 was eliminated as well. So if you've been following along and doing the simple math, we're now down to the C6, 7, and 8. So hit pause for just a second and leave your guess in the comments below, but be sure to come back. So next I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the C8 Corvette for three main reasons. First, fellow YouTuber Vet on Vet 757 already did that.
I can't believe that's my car. I'm like emotional. That's crazy. All right, let me go buy this thing real quick and then we'll fart with it.
No, I'm just kidding. That didn't weigh into my decision at all. But I must say, white with black accents, that is my first choice for the C8 Corvette, so I do dig it. All right, so here's the three real reasons I'm not going with a C8 Corvette just yet. Unless you want to play the long, lengthy waiting game by finding a dealer who's not going to tack on too much over MSRP for your C8 Corvette and then having to wait a couple years for it, you're going to have to end up buying it in the used market, which means you're still going to have to pay a pretty hefty premium for the privilege of driving that C8 today. Now, I've always been a huge fan of delayed gratification when it comes to material things because, for the most part, delaying that gratification a little while means a huge cost savings. Second, the C8 Corvette is relatively new compared to other generations of Corvettes, and that means the aftermarket support for the C8 is still very young, small, and in its infancy, which means the parts that are available are expensive because there's not a lot of competition. I want that competition because it brings their profit margins down to a normal level. Third, tunability or lack thereof. Now, GM has gone to great lengths to make it extremely difficult for aftermarket companies to engineer and provide tuning software for the C8 Corvette. So the last time I checked, which was just a few hours ago, the C8 Corvette is not on the HP Tuners supported vehicle list. yet. Now, I do believe there might be a couple of smaller companies that are offering tuning resources for the C8 Corvette, but it's still in its infancy, it's expensive, and the tuning community that goes with it is tiny, and that's a deal breaker for me. And lastly, I don't have the time, energy, money, or resources to even think about competing with some of the huge name YouTubers out there that are working with or have already worked with the C8 Corvette, so it's gonna have to sit up on that shelf for now. So now we're already down to just 2 generations, the C6 and the C7, and actually this was pretty easy for me to eliminate the C7. First, and this is kind of a petty reason, although I like the C7 a lot, I can't stand the gauge cluster because to me it looks like something that should be in a video game, as to analog gauges like the C6 has that looks like they belong in a real live performance car. Now I realize that these type of gauges are here to stay and I'm going to have to get over them sooner or later, but for now, let me have my analog gauges just a little while longer. Now the biggest and most important reason I ruled out the C7 is due to its price, which I think is overpriced, primarily because the C8s are still overpriced, which doesn't put the necessary downward pressure on the C7s quite yet. And so I simply cannot justify spending 45 grand on a C7 when I fully expect to buy a C8 Corvette in a few short years for about that same price. So because of the fact that I demand the most bang for my performance buck, I'm gonna have to eliminate the C7. And so that leaves us, of course, with 1 generation left, the C6 Corvette, and if you're really aware, you might have picked up its emblem off to my right. Now the C6 Corvette was offered from 2005 through 2013, and through those years, the changes that I'm most interested in have to do with the engines, differentials, and transmissions. So what years and what criteria am I requiring for this C6 purchase? Now, admittedly, I've kind of cast this net quite wide, so hopefully I can find some decent candidates in very quick order, because I really don't want to travel 4 states over and be looking for 3 months to find that very perfect C6 Corvette. So here are the criteria I used. First, I will not be buying a 2005 Corvette. I plan to drive this car aggressively and will likely be adding horsepower, and it just so happens the 2005s have a 1-year only rear differential that also happens to be the weakest differential of all of the C6 Corvettes.
So I'm pretty sure this is not supposed to look like this. That's not, well, I mean, sorry, I take it back. That's how a differential looks inside, but you're not supposed to see it on the outside.
And that's a huge deal, so the 2005 model year is out. Second, this car has to be a manual transmission because I really don't have any plans to drive it in heavy traffic. And the last time I checked, my left leg works pretty well, so it's a requirement for me. I've got to have 3 pedals on the floor. Third is the color. Although I am a huge fan of black C6 Corvettes, I want it to contrast with the C5, and so that leaves me with just a few choices. Either one of the darker grays or blues, a white, a red, or a silver. Fourth, it cannot be a convertible. The mere possibility of rolling over a Corvette convertible scares the daylights out of me, so convertibles are out. Lastly, it has to be overall in decent condition, especially the interior, because I'm not a fan of interior work, and it has to be priced fairly. Now, if it's cheap enough, I would consider putting in a new engine or a transmission rebuild, something like that, but I won't overpay. Now, I've been working on putting this video together for a little bit, and I actually just made a deal on a nice little C6, and that will be in the next video. So make sure you're subscribed. It's amazing to me how many people that watch these videos are not subscribed, and hit that little bell thingy so that you get notifications. And you'll get notified when that next video comes out with the C6. But for now, here's a little taste. As always, guys, thanks for watching.